Let's start out by checking if your D8B has the bare minimum of parts and cards that it needs to turn on and run as a mixer. And that's 1. The console itself with 2 specific cards in place. 2. The rack unit with its tail attached. And 3. A 25-pin console data cable. And a standard IAC power cable, but that needs no explanation. But there are some more details we have to check. 1. The console. The D8B console has some card slots in its back that should have at least 2 specific slots filled with the correct type of cards. The card slots are labeled on the bottom edge of the D8B chassis, right here. The digital I/O card slot has to be filled with a card that looks like this and nothing else. It's the only type of card made for that slot, and every D8B came with it. The sync card slot should have either one of the following 2 compatible cards installed. A slot blind covering the connectionless internally installed Mackie clock card. Remove the 2 screws to see if there is a Mackie clock card installed or if there's an empty card slot. B. There should be a card with no other connection than 2 BNC or bayonet connectors on it, as shown here. In properly installed orientation, the card should clearly be labeled as Apogee Clock I/O on the top of the card. That's the only 2 existing sync cards that will work for the D8B, and either one needs to be present, even for the most basic operation of the D8B as a mixer. A card that is labeled Apogee Digital I/O is the wrong card for the sync slot. Don't force it in, it's the wrong card. There should be no hole in it. Only effects cards have holes in it. Don't try to move the cards around before understanding what they all are and what goes where. If it's missing, check eBay or Reverb, etc. Whenever possible, get the Apogee Clock I/O card, since only that card will allow you to have the D8B sync to external vert clock. 2. The rack unit. The D8B rack unit has to have its BFC tail attached. The power supply for the console is in the rack unit, and the BFC cable is where the console gets its power from. The rack unit is essentially a vintage Windows 98 era PC running a custom yet DOS-based operating system with additional power supply components for the console. There were 2 versions of these rack units made, an older version and a newer version. It does not matter for the overall performance of the D8B system which one you have, since no audio is processed in the rack. Audio processing is all done on DSPs inside the console. However, the specific troubleshooting or maintenance instructions will differ slightly between the 2 different versions of the rack unit, so it's important to know which version you have. If you have the older version of the rack unit, the rear panel looks like this. Notice the position of the PS2 mouse connector immediately next to the AT keyboard connector here, as well as where the 3 needed cards are located. Let's compare that to the other version of the rack unit. If you have the newer version of the rack unit, the rear panel looks like this. Notice how there's nothing next to the keyboard connector. Instead, the mouse is connected here at the card slot panel. The placement of the video, network and MIDI cards is also different, since the corresponding slots on the PC mainboard on the inside are in different positions. We'll look at the difference on the inside of these rack units in a later video. For now, we're just checking if you have everything needed for a first power on test. At the very least, a compatible video card needs to be present for the D8B system to start up, but the rack unit needs to be complete for all of the D8B's features to work once we're done with troubleshooting. 3. The console data cable. This is otherwise known as a parallel or sometimes also serial cable with a female 25-pin sub-D connector on one end and a male 25-pin sub-D connector on the other end with a straight-through 1-to-1 wiring. This is a regular old-school PC cable to connect early PC peripherals to now long outdated 25-pin parallel or serial ports on early PCs that looked like this. A quick word of warning. There are several other incompatible 25-pin cable wiring standards with these same 25-pin connectors. But those cables are for different purposes and internally wired differently from how they would have to be to work on the console data port of the D8B. So if you get a box full of cables with your D8B, some of the cables that look right might be wired to work with these other 25-pin ports that can appear in the expansion card slots of the D8B depending on the installed cards. When in doubt about the console data cable you have, it should be relatively inexpensive to order a replacement parallel or serial PC cable of the needed length. In any case, your D8B will not be able to start up completely without the correct type of 25-pin old-school parallel or serial cable connecting the console data ports on the console and the rack unit. The console data port on the console is just to the right of the big FN connector or BFC connector. Connect the male end of the cable here. The console data port on the rack unit is the 25-pin connector closest to the power supply fan, or right above the 5-pin MIDI-looking AT keyboard connector. Connect the female end of the cable here. And don't forget to connect the BFC connector to the console. And the IAC power cable to an outlet. Now let's get ready to flick the switch and watch the display on the console for status updates. This is how it should go, and it should be done in about the time it takes here. For now, the takeaway is that a fully booted and functioning D8B system should show something like the following in the built-in display of the console. Gain, 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 gain. If that's what you see, congratulations! You can skip straight to the tips and tricks chapter of this video series. If the built-in display on your D8B takes a long time to update and then finally shows error 43 or something similar, then watch episode 2. We'll pick up from where we're leaving off right here.